It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future.
The New York Times had a great article. It was a truthful article too, which I felt is important, called "Who's Gaining Ground in Ukraine This Year? No One." Although both sides have launched ambitious offenses, the front line has barely shifted. After 18 months of war, a breakthrough looks more difficult than ever. The one initial critique I have for this article is I do not feel that Russia has really launched an offensive. As you recall, back basically pretty soon into the war, the Russian military was essentially in Kyiv, and they withdrew their forces. So they could have taken that city had they wanted at the time, and they didn't do it. And their strategic plan has always to hold this Nouveau Russia area that they, basically the states that are most Russian speaking that have voted to be a part of Russia and to be considered that. You have, you basically have it here in the south, cutting along the Dnipro River too, that goes straight through Kyiv. And so this is the front line, and Russia has built up essentially this whole line filled with minefields. It really goes back to, you wonder, like with Princess Diana, if Princess Kate Middleton is going to be over here operating the same playbook in a few years, going through the minefields and becoming basically, rehashing the past. But this hasn't moved basically since the start of the war. And this has, despite 9 months of bloody fighting, less than 500 square miles of territory has changed hands since the start of the year. A prolonged stalemate could weaken Western support for Ukraine. So, you have the Russian, and this is the territory that's changed this year. Nothing. Basically nothing. And it's, this is what all these people have died for. So you have, you've had some launches down on Sevastopol, where the Black Sea Fleet is down here. But it's nice to see the news, I guess more mainstream news, be more honest about this. So, northern Ukraine was basically up here, Kharkov region especially. You have the changes in territory each month. In February 2022, Russia gained quite a lot of space. And this was when they were really moving up into this northern region and pushing towards Kyiv. There were a lot of people that were worried that this whole thing would fall, but they withdrew. And the biggest pickup that Ukraine has seen are from optional withdrawals, both from Kherson, which is down here, on the bottom. You have the city of Kherson down here, which is right around that port mouth. But it's we're at a total stalemate, and the human loss is quite alarming, basically. So since January 1st, since, really this whole thing has been littered with minefields. You have entrenched positions for the Russian side. They've really gone in and militarized this whole region here in the Northeast. Let's see, for reference, let's look at and compare the resource map. So down here in the southeast, the Dnipro-Donetsk Basin is where you have a lot of the, I'd say, more legitimate natural resources opportunities. And then also here offshore of Crimea. So it's kind of an interesting deal. Here's a good map here. So this is where you have your consolidations of shale gas, especially, which is very strategically important to Europe. And the great map here, the ethno-linguistic map of Ukraine, when you compare that here to this, you have significant ethnic Russian population. You have the ethnic Russian minority or majority here in Crimea. And you have you basically have Russia fortified in where the people that have either a language, cultural, or historic cohesive story together. I just don't really see that this is going to be changing much. So talk about net gain. So Ukraine has gained 143 square miles of space. Russia has gained 331 square miles of space. So net gain of 188 square miles. This is smaller than New York City and smaller than Kyiv for both these individuals. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people dying over really very little land. It's, I think, disappointing a lot of people. And the only thing that you really have that can change this power balance here is really NATO actually physically getting involved in here. I think that's a lot of people's worst case scenario. One thing that I proposed to certain people was that the best case scenario here is that you have basically a demilitarized zone, which, in a sense, Russia is kind of building here as a separation with minefields between the more Russian-speaking areas that have been shelled, by Ukraine since 2014, and how that goes. So it's a cultural war, and it's an unfortunate thing to see how this whole thing has played out. But there's not much changing.
If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewnextpodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.